It all started with a photograph on a shelf. I found her with a lipstick in her hand. I whistle nay, and then the smile didn't seem quite genuine. Next to her stood a tall man in a suit with an authoritative posture, his hand confidently resting on her shoulder. Behind them, a grand piano, a fireplace, a perfect interior of a wealthy home. But in her eyes, there was something different, something that's different, something I couldn't explain back then. Sadness, fear, or maybe a scream she wasn't allowed to voice. I sat down, my eyes, an ordinary student, trying to keep afloat. At that time, I was an ordinary student, trying to keep afloat. I worked as a tutor on the side, mostly math, sometimes English. People who could afford it paid well, and for me, it was a chance not to quit school. The Ridley family came into my life through an advertisement. They needed a private tutor for their daughter Emily, a 12-year-old girl. The mother was hardly ever home. The father, Richard Ridley, was a well-known senator in town. He was respected, even feared, and rightfully so. He could make anyone's career or destroy it. I remember the first time I stepped into their mansion. Everything was sad. He qualified. She lol pies and memorald. She pad. Zerd eyes. Idam. Lie. She lolled. She pies. But that. She lolled. She lolled. She lolled. A bed. And Emily herself. Quiet. Fragile. Holding a book. With eyes that seemed to constantly check if her words were too much. On the first lesson, I asked her, "Do you like math?" She barely nodded. When I joked about algebra, she smiled for the first time, quickly, almost nervously, and then hid her eyes again. I thought maybe she was just shy, but something about her caught me. Too quiet, too quiet, too quiet, too quiet. For her age, a week passed. We met 3 times a week. I noticed she often wore long sleeves, even in the heat. One day, she started coughing, raised her sleeve, and I saw bruises on her wrist. She quickly covered them up. I asked if she was okay. She said, "I fell down the stairs," and immediately lowered her head, as if regretting she'd said anything at all. It didn't let me go. I tried to find out more. I asked the housekeeper, Mrs. Lacey. She just sighed and whispered, "Just teach, Mr. Crawford. Don't dig deeper than you have to, for your own good. And try all. Stay, for your own good. Let deferred, human eyes, aestheticy, and hoptus hide, so, fear into, somos, spring was said, emo, said it she, was and thou, and you, and that, sound like a threat. One evening, as I was about to leave, he stopped me in the hallway. Use, you, use, 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 he said, use, he shadows, he shadows, use, he shadows, use, you, use, he shadows, use, you, he shadows, you, he shadows, he shadows. He shadows, he shadows, he shadows, he shadows, he shadows, he shadows, he shadows. If you start imagining yourself as savior, We will part ways. Quickly. Isn't it that? Who, thereafter, and, after, and, sleep. No, no. Is I'm no longer, just, teaching, intrinsata, intrinsast, iniat, equals to, intrinsation, intrinsetter, intrinsay, intrinsetter, 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 intrinsetter. The lesson was short. Emily hardly spoke. When I was about to leave, she came up to me and spoke for the first time on her own. There was something icy in her voice. She said, "If I disappear, don't believe what they say." I froze. They wanted to err. I said, "They said to Maeve Dow, and right, and he sat and dead, and the edges." The next morning, I heard the news. Emily Ridley had vanished, simply disappeared into thin air. From that day, everything changed. In the evening, a friend called me and said, "Did you see the news? They're saying the senator's daughter disappeared. Your student, Emily." I opened the local TV station's website. The photo I knew all too well. A white dress, a sad look, and the same stone house in the background. The headline screamed the disappearance of Emily Ridley. Senator appeals to the public at first, and he's out. I couldn't believe. That to remember. Had I seen anything that could explain this? Was there something in her words that night I missed? Should I have stopped her? Taken her away? So what? Away. And her God. And her the way. The next day, a detective called me. His name was Moore. His voice was cold. He asked me to come in for a talk, not as a suspect, of course. Just someone who had contact with her, not as a suspect, of course. Just someone who had contact with her. I agreed, and I waited, hoping someone would finally figure out that this girl needed to be found. At the police station, they didn't greet me as a witness, but as a problem. Detective Moore started with neutral questions, but with every minute, his tone changed. "You were the last to see her, right? She was with you in the room, alone? Because, was anyone else nearby? Did you touch her?" I told the truth. Everything I knew, even that Emily had warned me she might disappear. I thought that would help, but Moore just squinted. "She said that. Interesting. Why exactly?" "She said that. Interesting. Why exactly to you?" The next day, my photos appeared in tabloids. Tudor, last person to see Emily alive. In the comments, insults, accusations. I couldn't even turn on my phone. Journalists waited outside the door. One shouted, "Hey, did you sell her somewhere?" I tried to prove I did nothing wrong. But evidence? What evidence do they expect when all that's against you is convenience? I was the perfect scapegoat. A black kid from a neighborhood where statistics are born, not lawyers, not politicians, not heroes. They never officially arrested me. no charges, but no family wanted me to teach their children anymore. I was kicked out of university, pending investigation. 2 weeks later, my landlord said, "Sorry, Jason, they're putting pressure on me. It's nothing personal. It's always like this. They don't throw you in prison. They just pull the floor out from under your feet and watch you fall." No Nuller. She was spat. Be thin. Spurred. Zumbet. And no. Be fey. Be thin. Because I'll fight him. Be fey. The news. Yo. No. Trace. Of Emily. The story was gradually replaced by other headlines, and I was left alone. To say, forgotten. That's whereas my subscriptions never voiced, but visible, in every glance. On the street, one morning, I caught myself not remembering the last time I thought about anything but her. Not about myself. Not about the future. Only that last sentence, she said, looking straight into my eyes. If I disappear, don't believe what they say. No, that Vin, Fay, that D, didn't change anything anymore. An hour's passed. Kitty hair was cast. They said, "You're away." He was sing cab. You know, then, he said, I worked night shifts at a freight company. They lived in a small apartment. In small apartment, in Basing Tao. In them I didn't see myself, but the person I had been made into. He said the puff. In Bury, 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 but I didn't. In Bury, 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 and I didn't believe. Be cold, in Sue, Bizola, no mice, in Drow, in the one. It was an ordinary evening. I went into a supermarket for coffee and bread. A lather, CC from a minutes. It was at all. Sunger, du was at her. Entered. Empty. It was at all. I turned and saw her. She was at the checkout, wearing a denim jacket and a baseball cap. Her hair longer than I remembered, but those eyes, the same ones, and the same cautious, restrained movements. She spoke to the cashier, but didn't look him in the eye. I noticed her hand trembling as she pulled bills from her wallet. I couldn't believe it. I stepped forward, about to say her name, but stopped. Something inside me screamed, "Not now. Think. Watch. What she does." She left the store, and it didn't get more. Tre, Emile, Ivilico den, the shame, Ivili, until was, she didn't look back. She walked confidently, as if she knew the way. She stopped, and sat near a small playground, sat on a bench, looked around, then took a letter out of her backpack, looked around again, and looked around again, and fold, slipped the envelope into the bench, then stood up and walked away. Without looking back, I approached. The envelope lay on the damp wooden beam, almost invisible. On it was written, my name, clearly, neatly, in black marker. Jason Crawford. My heart pounded so loudly, I couldn't hear anything else. I sat down and tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, and the first lines read, if you're reading this, it all means I made it, and it means I need your help again. I'm alive, but not free yet. My fingers trembled. I reread it over and over. She was alive. 5 years, and no news. That she was alive. 5 years, and no news. Noting. But she was alive, and she remembered me. And then, even stranger, she wrote that all this time, she lived under a false name, that she was forced to disappear, that her story was rewritten, and then, that the one who arranged this was still nearby, still in power, and still wanting her silence. That such, so with that, I apply, wrong, Emo was, and Owaid, if they didn't, chief, if they knee, omade, in knee, viewers, innate, 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 viewers, innate, 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 viewers, innate, 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 innate. You were the only one who listened, if you can still believe. If that, I will leave you a trace. And please, be careful. They are watching. I reread that letter dozens of times. Every word carried weight. Every phrase sounded like a warning, but also like a cry for help. She was calling out, and I couldn't ignore it. On the back of the page, there was another note. Tomorrow, 6:30 p.m., Reading Room, at the Elizabeth Street Library. On the left, the third shelf. Known the best. The third shelf. Look in. Be food. Be heal, any the faced for as in he. Be food. Any the food. Be 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 food. I knew that place. The old neighborhood library, where we once met for literature classes. I arrived an hour before the appointed time, entered like any regular visitor. No one paid attention. It's sad a bold that did shift. In Chad. I walked past the shelves and found the third shelf on the left. The red book. Anymore. Isado. And Chad. Anymore. And Chad. Anymore. Ahaf. And not. Into sunrise. I didn't open it right away. First she were fair amount on, and now I spee, I own he was, dud, this said, on Taberton, she was, sound, and doll, in Bayfu, in bees, she was, in bees, in bees, in bees, in bees, in bees, in bees, in peace, 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 in peace. At home, I plugged the flash drive into an old laptop that wasn't connected to the internet. There was only one folder on it. The title, She Knew. Inside were audio recordings, photos, documents. It all looked like a compiled dossier. Ideal. But the most important thing was a voice recording. Because this is my proof. If you're hearing this, it means I got out of their watch for at least a minute. They don't let me talk to whoever I want. In your eyes. Amen. They don't let me talk to whoever I want. Be confounded. They know when the cameras don't work. And I know what happened that night. And what she told me was hard to believe. Was hard to believe. It turned out, a few days before her disappearance, her father, Senator Ridley, met with unknown people. She overheard one of the conversations. They talked about a scandal, about damaging data that could ruin a career, and she accidentally found documents in her father's office that proved embezzlement of government funds, transfers to secret accounts, names of officials. She didn't know what to do with it, so she brought it to me, hoping I would advise her. And that's why she said that phrase. If I disappear, don't believe what they say. If I disappear, don't believe what they say. She didn't just disappear. They forced her, her father, or at least his team, arranged her disappearance. First, they isolated her, then officially declared her dead. Although the body was never found, she was held in a closed clinic disguised as psychiatric rehabilitation. And she was even treated under another name, Haley Thomas. In the documents, she was supposedly an orphan, with a history of depression. On the flash drive were photos from the clinic, scans of fake medical reports, and even videos secretly filmed in the ward, where she spoke to the camera. I know who I am, and I know why. They don't want you to know. I sat in a dark room, feeling a mix of rage, fear and determination. She was alive. She remembered. And she was fighting. Then, the phone rang. An unknown number. I didn't answer. The call repeated. Then again. When I finally pressed accept, that tell, my dandy, and she will eat. And she will eat, 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 and she will eat. And she will eat. It said, if you value your life, Mr. Crawford, you will forget you ever saw this flash drive. You are no longer a tutor, not a hero, and most importantly, you are not a messiah. She chose her fate, and you won't change it. I said nothing, just hung up, then turned off the phone, took the flash drive, wrapped it in an old t-shirt, and hid it in the ventilation, like when I was a kid, hiding money from thieves. Is that in the ventilation, like when I was a kid, hiding money from thieves. I knew one thing. From here on, I was going all the way. And that street, if it that dangerous, it means it's worth everything. The next morning, I gathered all the materials from the flash drive, made copies, and hid them in several places, just in case something went wrong. I knew they were watching, but I didn't know how close they already were. Note: I sent an anonymous tip to several independent media outlets. I forwarded some of the documents and a brief description of the story, without any names, but there was no response. None at all. Some simply ignored it. Others said, "These topics don't fit our editorial policy." And one journalist from Brooklyn, whom I called personally, abruptly ended the call when he heard the word Senator. He only managed to whisper, "You're not calling me. If you want to stay alive, don't call anyone." I felt everything around me tightening. I was accidentally shoved twice by strangers on the street. Once when I came home. The door wasn't fully closed. Inside everything looked as I left it. Oh, one at first glance. One corner of a cushion was slightly shifted, and the photo I always kept face up on the table was lying face down. I decided not to wait. If they were warning me, if it meant they were afraid. I found an old laptop, connected to public Wi-Fi, at a cafe, and started writing the story as a blog. The name was made up. The facts were real. I wrote the first part, about the girl who disappeared because she knew too much. And then, something unexpected happened. A comment under the post. Just 2 words. "You're close." I didn't recognize the nickname, but something about it seemed familiar. I refreshed the page and saw that someone left another message, this time in a private chat. 3rd subway station, platform A, 7:15 p.m. No later. No phone. I didn't know why, but I felt it, and I went. The platform was crowded. I stood by the wall, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. Trains arrived and departed, and suddenly, I saw her. She stood across from me. I said something moo. I saw her. She stood across from me. On the other side, a hat, dark glasses, a scarf. But I recognized her immediately. She lifted her eyes, looked straight at me, and nodded slightly. Then she pulled something like earphones from her pocket and placed them by the bench, and she left. I circled the station and went to that spot. It was a mini voice recorder. I turned it on, and I heard, "I have little time. I found out someone is trying to bring the truth to light. I don't know how much longer you'll be able to act, but there's someone who wants to help. A person on the inside. He works close to my father. His name is Liam. If anyone can be trusted, it's him. He will leave a sign for you. But don't look for me again. If we meet, they will destroy us both. If we meet us, but don't look for me again. If we meet, they will destroy us both." And then, noise. Neither cause. No. Nav. No. I had no choice. He went. Fraser Park. Midnight. The old greenhouse looked like a ghost from the past. Half collapsed. Overgrown. With weeds. With shards of glass and metal flickering inside. I entered through a side crack in the wall. No one was there, but he was where, the Emily said. "Inshallah you." And arose. "Didn't you?" She was purr. And not her. They sit down. I sat. A flashlight, with a red filter, lit up in the darkness. I couldn't see the face. Only a silhouette. He spoke. He spoke calmly and clearly. "Your name is Jason. You've come farther than most. Your name is Jason. You've come farther than most." And that seriously scared them. I said nothing. just tries. Interrupt. Interrupting. Interrupt. Inwit. Die. Dropping tea. Interrupt. Interrupt. I've been working on Senator Ridley's team since 2013. I saw files disappear. Witnesses vanish. They send it away. I wanted to leave, but I was afraid. Until I met her. She didn't ask for help. She gave me a reason not to stay silent. Levi's. It was Liam. Leo was Liam. They said. Leo was Liam. 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 Leo was spies. Leo was Liam. Leo was Liam. Leo was spies. 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 He handed me an envelope. Inside were original documents, payment translations, signed orders, even private messages between committee members, discussing how to silence the noise around the senator's daughter. This is the end for him, Liam said. If handled correctly, Mojapt, if see, you, when he cat, if you way, once you hit publish, you're no longer just a tutor, you're an enemy, and they won't forget. I left the park with the envelope under my jacket. If home is mind, with cell, except, events pass, the next day, and you, eventually to one dossier, and finally I reached out to an international journalism consortium, the kind that really listens, not through website forms. I so to a mutual activist friend, who had already survived one investigation. A week later, the first headlines appeared. Senator Ridley's daughter is alive. Systematic conspiracy to isolate witnesses. Insider. Whistleblower. Confirms. Illegal. Detention. For political reasons. Clinic. In the northern state. A secret prison for inconvenient people. And suddenly, everything changed. Eving detenged. Killed. Bishop. Sin. Betharis with the. An investigation began, and the clinic where Emily was held was shut down. 2 weeks after the publication, she was released from custody, under a different name, with a new passport, but free. We met in a cafe, where our acquaintance had once begun. She held a cup with both hands, just like before, but her gaze was different. Without fear. She only said, I won't be silent anymore. I smiled, and replied, Inderide. Neither will I. And you know what struck me most? After all this, how easily the system tries to erase those who disagree. How quickly someone can be labeled unfit, unstable, dangerous, and how little it takes for everyone to believe it. Until someone finally asks, what if it's not true? This was Emily's story. It was at the known bow. And this, is Emily. As she was made to Emily said, "Any too dark, because but then too, into silence. And now, that silence has been broken.